is Lennon Richards. I'm the director of pitching for Baseball Development Group. I've been working at BDG now for going on 2 years. Kind of throughout that time, I've really been diving in a lot to kind of the movements of pitchers, assessing pitchers, and just trying to help athletes reach their potential on the mound. Yeah, in terms of experience with biomechanics, a lot of that has actually come just through working, as a beta tester with Mike, right? With Mike, Dr. Mike Son. So, kind of prior to that, we were really doing a lot of qualitative assessments. So that was kind of based on a lot of, me learning or the teachings of Dr. Stephen Osterer and learning more about the kind of movements of the human body and qualitatively kind of figuring out what we think is the optimal kind of sequence of events for the throw. Over the last 6 months to a year, a lot of that emphasis has shifted a lot more to the quantitative side of things and figuring out how we kind of combine both our experience of the qualitative kind of movement capabilities of an athlete and then the quantitative side of things of how fast they're moving, when certain joints need to kind of peak their velocities, et cetera. The thing that's most exciting about PitchAI is kind of twofold. I mean, one is the flexibility of use and just how kind of disruptive the product is in terms of the motion capture game. Obviously, facilities across North America just do not have the money and the infrastructure to have a lab, right, and be able to spend tens of thousands of dollars on that technology. But kind of going along with that, I think one of the really interesting things about PitchAI, like I touched on, is kind of the flexibility of it. So obviously, other traditional motion captures are set up in kind of a lab atmosphere where things are very kind of controlled. Athletes are maybe a little bit more uncomfortable, and there are certain constraints that you have in that environment. So you can't necessarily kind of take video of guys in a training session, and you're doing things in very much of a kind of assess, reassess model. Whereas PitchAI can be kind of integrated throughout the entirety of an athlete's training kind of program and their training history, and so you can get a really interesting kind of just database for that particular athlete to see their trends over time. So, I mean, before we even do the reports, right? I mean, we have that qualitative assessment I was talking about. And, the big thing for us is also having an on-table joint range of motion assessment. So this is where we're figuring out how athletes can actually move kind of off the pitching mound. So how can they move on the table? How can they move through some functional movement screens? And then we're basically taking that information and looking at the reports, trying to diagnose if we're seeing those same issues on the kind of qualitative side of things. So we're looking at, first and foremost, things like, shoulder external rotation on PitchAI and see if that matches up to our on-table findings. We're also looking at, things like pelvis angle at foot plant and if that starts to match up with some of the hip range of motion that we've assessed athletes. And then, from there, I mean, I think the introductory course that Mike and all the guys put together was a really great kind of starting point for coaches. And I think the things that I would echo from there is to kind of use that summary tab in the report as a jumping off point and try to go from that summary tab and dive deeper into the angles and the velocities to figure out when athletes are moving into those positions at what point in time. So yeah, I don't think there's actually a single most important kind of measurement that PitchAI gives you. I think what the real value is being able to get that full quantitative report and be able to match different metrics to each other. So, one of the things is like you could look at a measurement just like hip to shoulder separation, but there's so much more that's going into that. How is a guy's pelvis angle at foot plant? How fast does he move out of hip to shoulder separation? When does that peak hip to shoulder separation occur? So I think there's a lot of things that, on the surface as a coach, you can kind of look at and you can understand, through that summary of where an athlete lies in kind of the database spectrum of PitchAI. But I think there's also a lot of application that you can do as a coach of trying to investigate further and figure out how all these different metrics kind of correlate with each other and how they influence the movement of the pitcher on the mound. So I think the biggest help of PitchAI is kind of, I've talked a little bit about the qualitative versus quantitative kind of things. And I think the biggest thing with coaches is historically we've really tried to do a lot of guesswork, right? We've tried to make those qualitative reports almost into a quantitative analysis. And, I think throughout our beta testing, one of the things I found is that just as a coach, like my coach's eye just is not that good. I can't quantitatively or sorry, I can't qualitatively assess some type of thing in a quantitative manner, So one of the things that we've shifted a lot more focus to is using that qualitative report as very much of a description of movement, and how that would influence the quantitative measures that PitchAI is giving you. So I think that's kind of the starting point. And then, like I talked about as well, is I think the daily training applications of PitchAI are really limitless when you think about it. And I think, as the product kind of improves more and more, you're going to be able to start to use it in different methods other than just a pitch, and expand kind of the use of that motion capture throughout all drill